In this video, we're going to explore the fascinating story of the Eudaemons, a group of university physics students who managed to trick casinos by breaking the code of the Las Vegas Roulette using nothing more than science. We'll uncover the details of their stories, motives and strategy of using scientific knowledge to successfully beat the most famous and previously considered bulletproof casino game, the Roulette. The group consisted of two leading members, Eudaemon Farmer and Norman Packard. The initiator of the mission was Eudaemon Farmer. He was born in Houston, Texas, on June 22, 1952, but his family relocated to New Mexico soon after, where he grew up. From his early childhood, he was already showing impressive signs of intelligence and interest in learning. One of the things that helped him focus his natural abilities was participation in scouting with a local Boy Scout leader, Tom Ingerson, who was also a physicist. He inspired Eudaemon to study science and see it as an adventure of its own. Tom constructed and planned their activities to specifically help scouts develop and acquire certain skills, as well as get them interested in achieving concrete goals through using a scientific way of thinking, collecting data, analyzing it, solving complex tasks, and searching for hidden treasures in order to use them for a mission to Mars. With his expertise in science and a unique teaching style aimed at raising the future generation of great scientists, he managed to completely captivate and excite Eudaemon for the rest of his life. With all the education and motivation he acquired during his early years, he had one dream for his future. He decided to become a world-renowned physicist who would uncover the scientific mysteries of the world. After finishing school, he went to Stanford University, where he studied physics, and later to the graduate school at the University of California to study astrophysics. It's here at the University of California where he met his childhood friend, Norman Packard, with whom he would soon devise a truly grandiose plan. The second brain of the operation was Norman Packard. He was born in 1954, Billings, Montana. Since childhood, he's also shown a strong proclivity for acquiring knowledge and developing intellectual skills. He and Eudaemon participated in the same Boy Scout activities where they became friends and both got fascinated by science, which defined their interconnected future. After several years of studying statistics at Reed College, he went to the University of California Graduate School to study physics, where he met Eudaemon yet again. They both got along exactly as in their childhood, and soon they also began realizing their mutual potential for the future. They wanted to become successful scientists and make valuable contributions to the world. Unfortunately, they had limited time, coupled with the fact that serious research projects required considerable funding and resources. Since they were from average, low-income American families at that time, and were also students, they understandably struggled financially, which put their dreams in an endangered position. They asked one question: how can we earn a lot of money in a short period of time? Not very soon after, an obvious idea came to their minds. What if we could earn money? A lot of it very quickly by figuring out how to beat a casino game, like the Roulette. With their advanced knowledge and education in science and physics specifically, they knew that the game itself was much more predictable than people might suspect, even though there was a famous quote attributed to Albert Einstein saying, "No one can possibly win at roulette unless he steals money from the table when the croupier isn't looking." Eudaemon and Norman begged to differ. They decided to dive deeper into the details of the matter, find the key to beating the roulette with science, and earn enough money not just for themselves but for the whole scientific community at large. With their ever-growing motivation and desire to achieve the goal of beating the roulette and taking the money, and in their case for the good of humanity, they decided to form a group, which they named Eudaemonic Enterprises, and called themselves the Eudaemons, which comes from the Greek ethical framework used by Aristotle, defined as a state of enlightenment that's derived from a life lived in accordance with reason. They began the first phase of analyzing the task from different perspectives to find out as much as possible about the most important factors in predicting the outcome of the game. They already understood that since the roulette is a physical object on which an action is conducted, while having a certain number of variables, by just using simple Newtonian laws of motion, one could in principle forecast the path of the ball on the wheel and its final destination. But now they needed hard data. The sooner the better. Primary objectives are to examine roulette's variability across different casinos, to analyze the game from within the casino itself, experimentally and observationally obtain the most important, constant measurements and variables, such as the roulette wheel's dimensions, the ball's speed, the wheel's rotation, both their initial positions, velocities, and acceleration, as well as how to best utilize this information for the successful achievement of the goal. These are the most important initial data for coming to the final answer to the question, is it really possible to scientifically beat the roulette game? Their first action was to go into several casinos undercover, in baggy clothes to conceal their identities, and to secretly bring a sound recorder to collect all the necessary data regarding the functioning of the game, to understand how casinos operate from the inside. From the obtained data, they quickly realized that the casinos in Las Vegas use BC Wills regulation roulette wheels. The rules of the game are very simple, which is probably why roulette is one of the most famous casino games. The player has the choice to bet on red, black, or numbers 1 to 36. They found out that the American roulette wheel has a different standard from the European one. It has an additional number, a 00, which makes its house edge, or the percentage of each bet you lose to the casino, exactly 5.26%. This is crucial information, because now they know that whatever casino they go into will have the same exact roulette wheel. Next are the questions about the wheels and balls speeds. Because the speed will vary depending on each individual croupier, they needed a precise method to track them. That's where the recorder comes into the game. By tapping on the recording button every time the wheel spins past a fixed point, they're able to calculate the wheel's spin speed. With the ball speed, while it rolls around the wheel's rim, bounces, and then falls, they needed to do exactly the same. Now they had an accurate and quick way to obtain 2 sets of variables for both the wheel's and the ball's initial speeds. But that's not all. Now they can measure how the wheel speed decreases over time, and possibly where the ball will eventually land. They get closer to finding the key to beating the roulette by the second. After collecting the first measurements, they began applying them to their mathematical model by including all of the roulette's available variables and testing them in as many variations as possible. They began to notice some reappearing patterns that were invisible to the naked eye. Their calculations are working. After the mathematical analysis, they quickly noticed that 2 variables were significantly more influential in predicting the outcome. The ball's position as it leaves the wheel's rim and the wheel's position of rotation as it happens. With their calculations, at least hypothetically, they can already determine a sector of 5 numbers where the ball is most likely to settle. Since their work is only in its early stages, it won't give them the correct answer each time, but it will substantially boost their chances of winning. According to statistical probability, if their method works, they're already at a 7-fold advantage over the house. But now another startling problem arises. How to collect all the necessary data inside the casino within seconds to process it on time, and then reliably and, importantly, inconspicuously receive the predicted outcomes. The problem only gets worse if you take into account their already bad financial situation. Making a mistake will cause them to lose everything very quickly. Next, to refine their data collection, they would need to get the American standard wheel for themselves and conduct their own experiments, consisting of thousands upon thousands of sample spins to retrieve every single remaining variable, and to find a way to use all of this information as compactly, quickly, and reliably as they can. The American standard wheels are produced by a single independent company, Paul's Son Gaming Supplies. They quickly ordered their wheel and waited for the shipment to their dorm room at the University of California. It was easier than they expected. The idea was to set the wheel in their dorm room and equip it with a number of triggers, in addition to sound and photo recording devices, in order to track the motion of the wheel and the ball, as well as the ball's exact landing place over thousands of sample spins, as accurately as possible. But very soon after, they received a notice saying that their order was being held at the shipment port, and that a request had been made for some clarifying information from the shipping company. Doyne immediately drove there to deal with the problem. But upon arrival, he got into a truly unexpected situation. 2 FBI agents began interrogating him to find out why he was purchasing a roulette wheel. Since gambling operations were heavily regulated and restricted by the law, he almost said the truth, but quickly decided to change the story to make them let him go. He said that he needed the wheel for collection purposes, and that he had nothing to do with gambling. After several hours of unstoppable questioning, they bought into his story and allowed the shipment to proceed forward. Later that day, they finally managed to set the wheel in their dorm room and began preparing to conduct experiments on the exact roulette wheel, as all the Las Vegas casinos have. 1 year after the start of the experimental stage, they already spend all their free time experimenting, analyzing the roulette and studying the probability. They're convinced that they're getting closer to the goal day by day. Their fixation requires huge effort and resources, but for them it's all worth it, because in the end they will become rich. To legally cover their future profits, they made a decision to create and officially register their own company. which they called Eudaemonic enterprises. In their dorm room, they've created a truly impressive model for testing. With the wheel fixed on the table, they surrounded it with various measuring devices, wires, a photo camera, and a supporting structure, which they called guillotine, with the purpose of taking photos of the wheel at a 90 degrees angle and at the perfect moment in time. With the camera above, connected to an oscilloscope next to the wheel, tracking the motion, and a microphone, which will trigger the camera at the exact moment of the ball's landing. The numbers and the position of the wheel would be recorded simultaneously. Such structure allowed them to accurately and reliably measure, collect, analyze, and finally predict the probability distribution of the ball on the wheel. Their brilliant plan is working. After running thousands of tests and sample spins and collecting a literal ton of data, they now had an almost perfect model that allowed them to track and analyze any roulette wheel after collecting the variables for at least 30 minutes. But in order to successfully predict the outcomes, they would need to obtain all the data while the wheel is in motion inside the casino, including the fact that usually about 15 seconds elapse from the time the croupier releases the ball until bets are closed. There are only 4 remaining variables that they would need to factor in with each new spin, which are dependent on the individual croupier. The 4 variables are the initial position of the wheel, the speed of the wheel's rotor, the initial location of the ball, and the speed of the ball, collecting all of the data, and then calculating the results without attracting unnecessary attention, while being in plain sight inside the casino. All of this in a very short window of time seems almost impossible. With their advanced education in math, physics, programming, and engineering, the solution to the problem became pretty obvious. They needed a portable computer. They began revisiting all the relevant material that they'd learned regarding this question, and because they weren't just about to stop after all this time and effort, they decided to go and face the task head-on. Creating the program isn't the hardest part, but engineering and then concealing a small computer under their clothes is. They were understandably worried because, to their knowledge, no one had ever done it before. The consequences of their failure are very likely to be catastrophic. In 1975, Las Vegas casinos were controlled and run by criminal gangs, so the breaking of the law was the last reason for their concern. After their mutual strenuous work and many cycles of trial and error, they finally hand-coded and developed the hardware for the computer. The main part of the device will be placed on the player's chest with wiring running down through clothes to one leg, with a simple switch placed on the soles of their shoes, and the batteries for the device placed under the player's armpit. All of these parts are necessary to make inputs of the data from both toe inputs and vibrating outputs, after which the computer will perform calculations of the variables with equations, which included trigonometry and the physics of motion for a rolling ball in a circular track, and then send a signal back to indicate the probability of the ball's location. The main part of the computer with a motherboard, which is placed on the chest, will be used for receiving the results. They've managed to get these electronic pads from the psychology department at their university. Now, at last, their dream is about to become a reality. Physics students against the Vegas roulette, with nothing more than science. In the winter of 1977, a very anxious Doyne farmer enters a Las Vegas casino, having a little bit of sweat on his forehead. He proceeds forward to choose a roulette table and then starts the game. He makes his bets cautiously and slowly increases their amount as the game progresses. It takes him some time, but eventually he begins to play like a fish in water, while secretly entering the data into the computer. The computer on his chest quickly gets the results and sends them as electrical shocks to his skin. The system is working. From the start of the game, he has 20 seconds at most to enter the data, receive the output, and place the bet. Even though it requires substantial amounts of speed and concentration, it provides a definite advantage in his favor. With their device, they've gained a 20% advantage over the house. After some time, his chips begin to noticeably build up. He is making money and beating the roulette. Then he takes his hard-earned chips and exchanges them for the money at the casino's cashier. He managed to make several $100s, which would now be several thousand, almost out of nothing in minutes. Happy with his money, he went to the exit, and now he is ready for the big game with his group, knowing that their plan is working. Now they would need to increase the stakes and together hit the Vegas casinos hard. Ecstatic after the first successful game, Doyne and Norman decided that in order to make millions, they had to expand the team. The ideal formula for success is to work in pairs. One gathers the data and signals which numbers to choose, and the other places the bets while diverting attention from the first one. They know that it's common practice for the casino staff to pay close attention to those who bet and win too much of the time, and even take them for questioning. That's why it's ideal that the bettor can be very chatty and friendly with the other players and the croupier, thus diverting attention from the data gatherer while having nothing to hide from the vigilant staff. Within several weeks, they've managed to involve 20 other science students with the cash to prove their point. At the end, they promised to distribute the money evenly among them and also fund the scientific community at large. Since the students normally had low budgets, they were more than happy to participate. At this point in time, they have already spent their money on both the experimental and engineering work and the additional people in the group. So their plan is to gradually increase the stakes as the game progresses and their stacks of chips build up. Of course, some people started to get concerned about the safety of the operation, asking, "What if we get caught?" Doyne reassured them by saying that it would be very unlikely, since the device would only predict a 5-number sector on the wheel, while a bettor would make several different bets that would be spread out across the table. So their betting patterns would seem totally random to everyone. After that, they've spent some more time on device building and training the recruits, so that all of them can work in perfect unison, each beating the roulette one after another. Finally, in August 1978, the group is ready to play. The group, consisting of young students, entered the Las Vegas casino, and after splitting into playing pairs, they all proceeded to their places. The nervousness was rampant across the group and their expectations were high. Nevertheless, they were finally ready to beat the roulette together. After taking their tables, the data gathering begins, and the bets start to follow, with the bettors gradually increasing the stakes. $2, then $5, then $7. The chips began to multiply. Already after the first hour, Doyne and Norman's team had $1,200, which is equivalent to $7,000 now. The other teams are doing the same, magnifying the reward. Everyone has gotten euphoric until the casino security staff began to observe them closer, a group of youngsters which are extremely prominent among the casino's usual gambling clientele, and their suspicious luck haven't gone unnoticed. After their successful evening games, the students regrouped to form new pairs, but they already began to notice some tension among the security staff, which were closing in on them by the minute. Plus, some of the team members began experiencing problems with their devices. The water from their sweat interfered with the electrical circuits and solenoid liquid, which caused them to either stop working or, on the contrary, amplify the shocks, to the point where several people got serious burns on their skin. They definitely haven't expected this, the increasing malfunctioning of the devices, because of the physical breakage and chemical interference, causing trauma to several people, and the constantly growing threat from the casino's gang members put a serious strain on the group. Doyne and the others could only think about raising the stakes. If only they could all reach at least $50 stakes. They'd have $250,000 now. They came out of the casino to count the money and discuss the situation. They certainly managed to use science to beat the roulette, but for the limited time they had, they only managed to make $10,000 and a ton of problems. They were standing at a crossroads, deciding whether to reinvest the money, rebuild the devices and make another attempt, or to withdraw, distribute the profit and go by living their lives as friends, after seriously considering the options for their own good. Now, Professor Doyne Farmer, Norman Packard and the others took the second option. In 2012, Doyne decided to share with the world his experience by breaking his silence on how exactly he managed to beat the Las Vegas roulette, and adding that he didn't want to communicate any information that might prevent anyone from taking the casino's money. Thus, we now know this extremely captivating story of how regular students managed to beat a casino game with science. If you've enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to support the channel by liking and subscribing. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. See you in the next one.